Hello and welcome to the Age of Light. It's a very great pleasure to welcome Richard Garrett to our conversation today. Richard is the marketing manager of OEM, which is the equipment manufacturing side of Signify, which is part of Philips, which is a pioneering brand in lighting, which many of you will have heard of. You'll have heard of Philips Hue and some of the other great products they're going to do. So they're involved with. So Richard has kindly agreed to talk to us today about human-centered lighting and what that means for us in our homes and circadian lighting. In fact, he's got a really fascinating talk for us, coming from someone with many years' experience in the sector. So very much looking forward to that. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Yes, so I've been in the lighting industry for about 11 years now, and I've always enjoyed this topic. It's often come up in various different ways, shapes and forms, and it seems to be a very popular discussion again. So I thought I'd cover it and talk about where I see it from kind of a market perspective, but also sort of a scientific perspective as well. And so kind of cover over the relationship of lighting quite briefly. That's much more of a general sort of focus. Then the human-centric element of lighting as well, which I perceive to be a little different to circadian rhythm lighting. Circadian rhythm and lighting that's sympathetic to human circadian rhythm, I feel is a subsector of human-centric lighting. And then a little bit of a fun bit at the end of sort of the future of lighting and some of the technology and innovations that we may have seen in the past, and that may be making a resurgence, and how that affects our future relationship with light as well. So I always like this comment. I always find this one quite funny, and that the light bulb was such a good idea, it became iconic of a good idea. Now I forget exactly who to reference on this, because I think it's popped around a few times, but it's not my own personal words, but I do find it quite poignant. But we've come a long way from the humble light bulb, from when we just purely relied on natural light, and then and now how we've developed the light bulb, and now we've developed lighting solutions, and ultimately our relationship is an interesting one. In the olden days, when our light bulbs sort of popped and burst after about a year's worth of use, we found it very frustrating that we find ourselves without light. But then at the same time, we spend a fortune on going to gigs and tours and concerts and things like that, and you'd be very put off if you turned up and there was just someone on stage literally just playing their song list with just a couple of lights to illuminate them. So the complexity and the emotion that goes into designing the lighting structure behind each track of a song, for example, is quite intense, and it has to be, in order for us to get the best experience that we can out of these sort of events. And especially around the UK now, people spend quite a lot of money as well to go to see lighting installations. So Christmas at Kew is a very popular one around sort of Christmas time, and the light artists that frequent that space, and how they get us to feel different emotions through light, and it's replicated across the country. I know Leeds do a massive, great big light festival, similarly in Manchester and Edinburgh, and they pop up all the time, and people are literally buying a ticket to go and see light. So it's an interesting relationship, and I do find it a fascinating one. And I suppose we focus on light that we experience most of the time, and for a lot of us, we spend a lot of our time in office spaces, and office spaces are under a little bit of pressure at the moment. We've all spent a significant period of time being away from them, whether that's being furloughed or working from home, and some reports coming back that people are suggesting that they won't be back into the office until next year in some instances. And so the place that we experience artificial light arguably most commonly is in the workplace. And I took some statistics from a few different areas. So Gallup's is one, Deloitte and Forbes had quite a few different studies all around how we perform, and it's all about around productivity and how we feel at work. And this is where light has been often taken for granted, which is odd because we spend so much time under artificial light in these spaces. So we need to make sure that the light that we're utilised is being implemented in a way that is human-centric. Ultimately, we are the ultimate end users of light, whether we're in the industry or not, wherever we work. It's important that we have the right light, and there's a lot of alignment now being put together with kind of good lighting design, and also tunable light, and how that can affect our productivity, and how that is studied and understood is quite fascinating. So I'll go on to sort of the broader term that's become more popular over the last a couple of years now, probably, of human-centric lighting. And I always get asked, what on earth is he going on about? And so I always like to use quite a reliable source of the Lighting Europe explanation is what they perceive human-centric lighting to be. And so I see this as being quite broad, but I think it has to be as well at the same time, that any type of lighting that can affect our biological and emotional health or well-being of us is bound to be broader than just what tone and what lighting intensity you're utilizing over someone's desk in the example of an office. So I've kind of put together a bit of a word jumble of things that I felt were quite strong at explaining where we are with human-centric lighting anyway. And my lighting design friends will thank me very much for highlighting that the fundamental requirement in professional spaces of a lighting design, making sure that you've got the right light in the right place at the right time, is essential. So I think before we delve any further down, I think we can probably look not particularly too far, I suppose, at some examples from some of our friends outside of the lighting industry who are probably experiencing some pretty atrocious lighting. Not that it was bad when it went in, but it's just as spaces change, the lighting requirements have changed, but the lighting infrastructure hasn't. So the requirement of keeping up-to-date lighting design, I think, kind of comes at the centre of a lot of this. And another element that's highlighted there is natural light. So I'm regularly informed that actually the best way to reset our human circadian rhythm is just pop outside for half an hour and experience natural light. And that's a very good point, because I think although as much as I would love for artificial lights to be the best source of light for all of us, I don't think any innovation that comes along will come close to rivaling natural light and the benefits of us being outside and experiencing the natural world as well as natural light. So I think those two are kind of the key elements, and as we see more and more buildings utilizing natural light and the artificial light being a supplementation factor of the natural light that becomes more and more prevalent in our workspaces, I think we can start to kind of merge these two together, natural light being the preference, but we also know that the requirement for artificial light will never go away. And I won't go through these one by one, but I think there's an awful lot of crossovers. So in the next few slides, I'll discuss circadian rhythm, melatonin and cortisol, links to productivity, health and well-being as well, non-visual lighting effects. And I'll cover that in the next few slides, but a couple of the other ones that I think are very important is lighting for the aging vision is a huge one. So we are reliably informed that it's going to take someone like myself quite a lot longer to retire based on a myriad of different elements. So it may well be that I'm working into my mid-70s, early 70s, and early retirement may not be an option. Who knows? We will see. But what will be important at that point in time is there'll be people in a working environment in their late 60s, 70s, and there'll be others in that same environment who are just leaving university. So having the right light for the range of people may find that we end up seeing a greater demand and a greater requirement for two other points on here, which is artificial intelligence and end user autonomy. We've all been victim of unintelligent artificial intelligence. So the more we work on things like user experience and user interface, the better we can get at creating this artificial intelligence that goes behind the requirements of lighting end users within a space. And so that's really important. When we talk a lot about connected light and a lot of intelligence that goes into the background of what drives our lighting systems, and we need to make sure that we spend a lot of time building in the right value for each and every individual end user based on their requirements and based on their application, to make sure that if we are implementing levels of artificial intelligence, that they are indeed they are intelligent. But also a lot more options are available to us through connected lighting that allows for end user autonomy. So that could be a simple switch on the wall or something a bit more intelligent that connects to our smartphones, and we can actually set the tone and the output of the light fixtures above our head, so we can ramp up the output if required and dim it down if required. So that end user autonomy is quite an interesting development as we move sort of kind of closer towards understanding how autonomy relates to productivity. There have been a few sort of studies that have kind of linked people feeling more productive within a space if they can walk into a meeting room, for example, and set the light tone and the light effect. And also this does go back to lighting design as well, making sure that the fundamentals are in place first of all, and that people can, if it's not the right light for them, that they have the potential to make amendments to the light. That could be simple task lighting, in fact, or it could be something a little bit more connected and more technologically advanced.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add sustainability in here as well. I think that's an important point. I think there's a bigger driver for us all to be connected to companies and organisations that can really walk the walk when it comes to running a sustainable company. And even if that comes down to the building being run sustainably, so an energy efficient lighting solution, but also something that's perhaps eco-modular in its design, so that we can talk about upgrading light points again as opposed to ripping them out and replacing them with single-use products. And I think lighting has a link there, sustainability and human centricity. I do think there's a link, as we feel more and more encouraged by the organisations that are embracing sustainability. There's a few other points there, but I'll feel free to ask any questions afterwards, and feel free to contact me if you do have any questions about any other things that I may have skipped over. But I am keen to sort of move on to the main topic I think that people talk about when they discuss human-centric lighting. I think most people really mean lighting that's sympathetic to our circadian rhythm. And ultimately, we want to understand how artificial light affects our circadian rhythm, because our circadian rhythm is ultimately our body clock that gets reset as we experience daylight and night. And the idea being that we want to make sure that cortisol is in place and being created at the right times, and melatonin similarly doing the same thing. So in an ideal world, we wake up naturally. I don't think anyone really does. I think everyone gets woken up by an alarm clock of sorts. But it's a melatonin fading off and the cortisol ramping up that wakes us in an ideal world. I know we're not quite there. And then over the course of the day, we experience enough natural light so that we can regularly reset that to make sure that when it gets dark, the melatonin in our body is in sufficient quantities that we can allow ourselves to go to sleep without too much of a fight. And so the question really is, can artificial light do a job, not necessarily the same job, but can it do a form of the job that natural light does in resetting that? And I think anecdotally, yes, we see an awful lot of non-scientific projects put together where people are interviewed before, during, and after, and whether they like the difference between a traditional a lighting installation utilizing whatever technology you like, a LED or otherwise. And then what about something that's more dynamic? And I know there were quite a few cases last year that that really focused on specific projects, and sometimes the sample size was quite small, but they were really focusing on how autonomy, so people being able to set their own light tones, helped and worked, or similarly, if there was a sensor outside of the building that was kind of having kind of a communication of sorts, if you like, with whatever the light tone was and the light output was outside, and how that could be similarly reflected inside the building. So it's not a bad thing to do at all. I think we need to test out the technology that's available to us, especially the autonomy, how user intuitive that technology is, and how that allows us to interact with light. But I'm a personal opinion here, and Signify kind of we want to align ourselves to the science. My personal opinion is I'm not 100% sure we'll ever get to the stage where there'll be a peer-reviewed journal that can say there's a significantly positive effect on us as human beings from us experiencing light that is tunable to the natural biorhythms of the day. That's my personal opinion, but I don't think that needs to necessarily devalue the fact that some people do see a huge rise in productivity by having the autonomy to decide on what light effect they live and work under, and we just have to be mindful of that some people react better in those environments. I suppose the understanding is whether anyone really starts to dislike that environment to a specific extent. And again, we need to make sure that we're not implementing lighting solutions that could do the opposite. So you don't want to end up with some people being productive, others being unproductive. And similarly, by installing a light fixture, you don't want to flip that balance either. So it's very important that we keep track of the studies that are being undertaken. And I mentioned before, but I think the application of installing tunable white light solutions into workspaces and into our homes as well, to be honest, is far more achievable nowadays. So in the home, there are many different connected lighting solutions. I obviously have my preference, but with Philips Hue, you have the ability to tune up and tune down the color tones, and you can link that to a schedule. You can have that in your task lighting that you may have on your office desk at home, and to be able to tune that and have that autonomy to change it or set up a schedule that manages that autonomy for you is so much more readily available and so much more achievable than it ever was in the past. And I think in office spaces, in industrial institutions, in retail environments, in education settings, I think with the availability of technology that allows our fixtures to be more connected, the application of human-centric lighting in a tunable sense is far more readily available and far more achievable for us to start installing into settings without a massive uplift in cost. Whereas I think beforehand, perhaps there was a significant, or the cost wasn't justifiable to jump to perhaps a tunable solution. So in my current role, I'm a marketing manager for the OEM team at Signify for the UK and Ireland. And so we kind of look at a component level, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a tunable solution that you install. We also have solutions which is sign enhanced spectrum, and there's a specific spectrum of light that's emphasized within our boards that can help the body suppress secretion of melatonin during the day. So the idea of keeping you as active as possible. And I think the study behind blue spectrum light fixtures are quite fascinating. There's been an awful lot of science that says, well, you really shouldn't be on your phone for, too close to the time that you plan to sleep, because of the blue light waves that are delivered from a smartphone. But I forget the edition it was, but in New Scientist magazine last year there was a study that suggested that actually even in the biggest iPad on the highest brightness settings, looking at that for 2 hours before you go to sleep wouldn't have a specifically long knock-on effect to when you'll actually fall asleep. And that study suggested it's probably more likely content of what it is that you're reading on your iPhone or your smartphone or your tablet. It's more likely content than it is the delivery of blue light wave spectrums. And so that kind of jumped against some of the other studies that we've seen that suggest that blue light is quite a negative thing.
I have to say, Richard, that I've seen a lot of studies which do. I mean, I take your point that it may not be completely conclusive, but I have seen a lot of science which does say that those blue wavelengths are pretty important, actually. So
indeed, yes.
I think you have to agree to disagree on that one.
Oh no! I think it's absolutely correct. So I've seen some other ones that suggest that there could be as long as a 3-hour delay in you getting REM sleep after being exposed to blue light waves. So we need to keep an eye on the science, is what I'm saying, to understand and make sure that what we're delivering as products ultimately that go out to market are aligned correctly with what the science is suggesting. And so we need to be careful that that the studies that are coming through that are counteracting other studies are matched, and it's an art within itself, isn't it, to sort of understand how each study came up with a final conclusion. So I think there's
we're going to spend too much longer on this now, Richard, because I think we're running out of time, to be honest. But
sure.
I take your. I mean, I agree that we need to be careful, not to just quote things willy-nilly, but I would say that the science is now fairly conclusive that blue light from LEDs and from screens are an issue when it comes to setting your body clock. But anyway, let's move on.
Yes. Indeed. So I'm pretty much at the end now, actually. I had one last sort of slide that kind of looked at the future of lighting, and I've got it right here. Blue light spectrum management will continue to be an innovation in how we understand the science, but also how we apply that into products and how we apply that into solutions that get experienced by lighting end users is quite important and will remain important. So absolutely, we need to keep an eye out for that and the developments that come along in that area. But a few other interesting ones. So Li-Fi is an interesting one where we link up wireless fidelity utilizing the light spectrum. So that's a technology that is available now and perhaps not mainstream. So it'll be interesting to see where that sort of technology goes. I do think bioadaptive lighting is another term that we often hear will ebb and flow along for the next sort of 3 to 5 years. And again, that's sort of tied in quite closely with this blue light spectrum discussion. Bioluminescence is a fascinating one. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to name drop, but there is a company who's doing quite a lot of interesting work with bioluminescence, and the idea that in fact actually our light fixtures aren't connected to an electricity source. They're fed, and you feed them and they deliver bioluminescence as a result of feeding. So that's quite an interesting one. I don't suggest that I'll be feeding my light fixtures in my house within my lifetime, but I may be entirely wrong. But it's interesting to see that they're kind of there are organisations who are focusing their efforts into seeing what can be done with bioluminescence in lighting for human beings. And a few of these are more business directions. So, do we ever find a world where we don't sort of sell lighting products? We sell recurring revenue structures, which means that we can upgrade our light fixtures sustainably, and we can incorporate overall cost of a lighting fit out into kind of a monthly payment scheme, which makes it more efficient for any businesses who are struggling a bit with capex. 3D printing is an interesting one, more around the sustainability point that becomes more and more important for all of us as human beings. Organic LED has been around for quite a while, but there seems to be a little bit of a resurgence with some people investing quite heavily in OLED, now more traditionally linked to TVs as opposed to functional lighting. And then LED through graphene. So graphene very, very, very strong. Can we extend the life of LED products by incorporating an element of graphene into manufacture? A question mark. And how does that affect us? And if we're under a light fixture that lasts for a specifically long period of time, how does that affect us as end users? Because spaces change and LEDs will still need to be upgraded or added as spaces change. But I think I'll probably end it there. It's probably a good place to end. But it's interesting to kind of try every now and then have a bit of a look forward to see where the lighting world will be, and also how in future lighting can affect us as human beings. So as I say, that's probably in a very, very small, tiny little nutshell, a good place to end it. But I completely take your point. Everything that we do in the lighting industry needs to be aligned to the science, and we need to have a full understanding of what's going on in that, so that we understand exactly how humans experience light and how important it is they experience light in the right way. I'll stop sharing my screen there. Was that okay? Yeah, it was a little bit longer, wasn't it, than 15 minutes, I think. But hopefully that was... Oh, have I lost you completely?
Can we just go back? We lost you. I lost you briefly. So could you just go back to that slide where you were talking about bioluminescence, and I'll cut. So could you begin saying bioluminescence and then...
Yes, sure. So bioluminescence is a really fascinating area of research and development when it comes to lighting products and solutions. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to name drop, but there's a fascinating up to the electricity grid.
Sorry, can you just stop again? Sorry, could you just begin again? Because I lost you, and I just put a kind of a chat in the middle of the screen. I'm so sorry about this. If you just begin.
No problem at all.
Could you begin with bioluminescence again, and then onto your final slide? That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. No problem at all. Bioluminescence is a really fascinating one. There's a couple of organisations, and there's one that I sort of follow fairly closely, that looks at whether we can get to a position where our light fixtures are no longer connected to the power grid, no longer requires electricity. Instead, you feed your light fixtures, which is quite an interesting idea. And they're doing some fantastic things and fantastic research to see how this could possibly work. And who knows? Maybe in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, we'll find this to be more commonplace, that you can start to use bioluminescence as sort of the ultimate energy saving solution. Who knows? But it's fascinating. It's an interesting area to keep an eye on. There's a few other areas here. I won't go through all of them. Some are just sort of new business models, incorporating recurring revenue structures and sustainable upgrades of products. But there are others, such as organic LED, that was quite a major innovation, probably 5-6 years ago now. And I'm starting to see a few OLED, organic LED products coming into the market. Now it's more traditionally known to be linked to sort of higher end televisions, but it seems to be making a move back into functional light, because it's a very pleasant lighting effect to be underneath. So that could be interesting to see if OLED kind of ebbs and flows in this way. 3D printing is an interesting one. There's a lot going into the sustainability behind 3D printing and manufacturing remove some of the energy hungry and maintenance hungry tooling to incorporate a more energy efficient way of manufacturing fixtures, and also reducing kind of bill of materials that makes up products, so you're not shipping things like nuts and bolts around the country. Instead, you can design a fixture in a way that clicks together and can be simply disassembled and recycled at the end of life in a more energy efficient way than when you compare it to sort of die cast aluminium and things. That's interesting to see where that could possibly go. And the other one I get asked a lot about is LED through graphene. So graphene is a very good at strengthening products. It's got very good strengthening materials, and whether manufacturing LED chips with graphene extends the life of that product, but would also need to be incorporated within the other components to make sure that the long life is felt throughout the management of that fixture. So again, an interesting topic to keep an eye on as it develops more and more. But I suppose overall we just need to make sure that all of these innovations together keep us as lighting end users at the heart of everything that we do. So it's not necessarily just innovation for innovation's sake. We also need to make sure that the bioadaptive lighting, if we are going to go down that channel in a big way, as we've discussed, takes in the blue light spectrum element, and also takes in the overall experience and health and well-being of us as lighting end users. So I think in a very small nutshell, I'll probably leave it there, but I'm more than happy to open up for any discussions afterwards, either via email or otherwise.
If you can hear me now.
Yes, yes, I've got you here.
Sorry. Can you? I'm so sorry. You cut out just after you said that all these technologies are, fantastic, but we need to make sure that we are at the heart of them. So would you be willing to just, you could just flip onto this last slide and just say that. That would be fantastic.
Sure. So really any innovations that we develop, I think it's just important that we have that human-centric approach, that we do make sure that we're keeping the lighting end user at the heart of it, that they feel value from the lighting infrastructure, and that lighting isn't just sort of kind of a frustration point for people like it was before with old technology light bulbs that would pop every few minutes. So I think human centricity is key, and that we keep that at the heart of any innovations, and whatever the future of lighting looks like. Human centricity, I think, needs to be a key area for all of us to focus on.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was absolutely fascinating, and I'm looking forward to reading out the lights that I can feed myself. So let's just turn our screens on again.
Indeed, yes. Some of these are particularly, I find them anyway, particularly fascinating. Things like bioluminescence is very, very interesting.
How exciting! So thank you so much for your time. That was really great to hear all of that information from you, right at the heart of the innovation. Because as I understand it, your team produce the components that then go into the lights that ordinary people in their homes buy. So it's just fantastic to have the perspective. So thank you again, Richard. That was really brilliant.
No worries. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Bye now.